This is a little awkward because I actually have nothing prepared. This is literally my only slide. I've been thinking about this for like 2 years, and I sort of thought it would just fall into place on its own, but turns out you actually have to write these things. So I thought maybe we could just watch Office Space for the next little while. Is that cool? No, I'm kidding, of course. We have lots to talk about. First, some introductions. My name is Jim Rispin. I'm the Director of IT at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California. For those of you who have attended my talks before, you know that I like to lower expectations just enough to avoid litigation. So in that spirit, let me say that I consider myself a pretty good manager, and I've put a lot of these things that I'll talk about today into practice with some fair success. So I know the advice is quality. However, my master's degree is in ethics, not in business. I've never written any books on this stuff. I don't have the seal of approval from 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed. In other words, I am not an expert in any of this. So while I stand behind the information in this session, if you end up getting fired as a result of putting some of this into practice, well, I'll feel bad for you, but I will not accept responsibility for you, your family, or any transients living in your home. So, though if you do get fired, give me a call, because I'm looking for a good junior sysadmin. Just remember that California's expensive, and higher ed doesn't pay for crap. So, why have I gathered you all here, besides my seemingly pathological need to give away all this crap up here? We are here to talk about managing up. So, hopefully by the end of this time, you'll know what that means and what it doesn't mean, why we should even bother managing up in the first place, the importance of understanding yourself and your role in your organization as well as that of your boss. We'll have a little fun exploring some of the worst kinds of bosses with a few tips on managing them. And finally, we'll dive deep into some of the general tips and tactics you need to begin improving your relationship with your boss. Here are a few things we won't be covering. If you're disappointed, now's the time to leave. All right, let's begin by defining our key term, managing up. Who here has heard this term before? All right. So for those of you who've heard it, tell me what you think it means. Just shout it out. Anything. If you've heard it, come on. Any ideas? Go. Getting your way. Okay, anything else? How to manage expectations, not bad, yes? Sort of delegating tasks or directing, okay?
Making your boss look good.
Making your boss look good. Now, I'm going to give you a prize for that answer. As a boss, shirt or other?
Other.
Ooh, all right. Here it comes. First prize of the session. There we go. And she doesn't get it. All right. Let's get this out of the way right now. Managing up is not sucking up. It's not about lying or brown-nosing or scheming or tricking your boss into doing what you want. We are not here to help you become better manipulators at work. If you're looking for that, you'd do better to spend time watching this for a couple hours. You can stream it on Amazon Prime. It's about 2 hours long, so if you go now, you can finish it before dinner starts. If you haven't seen this movie, the main character rises from window washer to president of the worldwide Wicket Company by lying, scheming, and manipulating his way to the top. It is everything we are not going to talk about today. It is also a fantastic example of the blatant sexism of the 1960s. So, enjoy. Here's my definition. Managing up is the act of cultivating a healthy relationship with your boss to achieve the best possible benefit for you, your boss, and your organization. But why bother? Since we've established that managing up isn't really for political or personal gain, what's the point? Isn't it enough to come in, do your work, go home, even if you have to put up with a boss that sucks in the process? Well, let's explore that logic for just a minute. I've used this stat before. Does anybody remember what it means? No? This is the percentage of people who are actively engaged in their jobs. It's possible your boss might have something to do with whether or not you're in this 32%. This is the number of people who say that they have horrible bosses. So according to the group over at Robert Half, if this stat is correct, that means half of you in this room really don't want to go back to work next week. And according to the Huffington Post, the #1 cause of unhappiness at work is bad bosses. You've heard it said that people leave bosses, not jobs. And all of us have had bosses we've hated and chose to leave, but what if you put a little effort into managing that relationship better? An otherwise intolerable situation could have turned out to be a great career experience. Remember that your relationship with your boss is fundamentally about a mutual dependence between two fallible human beings. Keyword there is fallible. You may want them to be perfect, and they may pretend to be sometimes, but both of you are flawed sacks of meat who will screw up a lot more than you'd care to admit. But you still rely on one another. You depend on your boss to give you the information and priorities you need to align your work with the goals of your organization. And your boss depends on your help, your cooperation, and your honesty to do their job effectively. Interdependence in our work is a fact of life. So, unless you're a roadkill collector, you're not entirely self-sufficient in your work. Heck, even these guys need animals to be stupid and reckless sometimes. Real job, by the way. The reality is, you need your boss, and your boss needs you. And unless that relationship is healthy and thriving, neither of you are likely to get what you need. So why bother? Because managing your boss is as much a part of your job as managing you is a part of theirs. Because your success or failure in your job can hinge on your ability to manage up. One could even argue that if the challenges your boss has in managing are known quantities, then a successful relationship with your boss relies all the more on your ability to compensate for those challenges. Let's put it this way. What if it's a known fact among your team that your boss sucks at responding to email, even when it's important, but you choose to send him an email message about a mission-critical license that's about to lapse instead of giving him a call or walking to his office to tell him directly? Then the lapse occurs, brings down that critical system, and calamity ensues. Mass hysteria, cats and dogs sleeping together, the whole thing. Whose fault is it that that failed? You or your boss? Well, sure, your boss didn't renew the license on time, but you didn't make sure he received that message in a way you knew would get through because you didn't compensate for a shortcoming you knew he had. In other words, you didn't manage up. At the end of the day, if you fail at your job in small or large part because of an inability to manage the relationship with your boss, then it will most likely be you that pays the heavier price. Okay, I want to pause here for a second and try something. This may fail miserably, but if it does, we'll all go down in flames together. It will surprise none of you that I'm a churchgoer, seminary graduate. And one of the things we do at church every Sunday is prayers of the people. Now relax, we're not going to hold hands and pray right now. But I do want to see if we can generate a little goodwill for one another by lifting up some of those things our bosses do that drive us crazy, and then doing a little call and response to show our love for each other. So, if you've got something in mind that you wish your boss didn't suck at, stand up, say your name, and then say, I wish my boss would stop or start X. And then I'll say, wow, that sucks. And all of you will say, that sucks big time. Are we clear? Let me give you an example. Hi, my name is Jim, and I wish my boss would stop giving me unsolicited neck massages. Wow, that sucks.
That sucks big time.
There we go, you get it. All right, who wants to give it a try? Now, if you're worried about your boss seeing this recording, you don't have to use your real name. Oh, and there will be prizes, so I'm going to need the box. Wow, hands up, here we go. All right, Tom's first. I worried that we wouldn't get any interest in this, but all right, go.
Myself, but it's a client thing. Hi, my name is Tom, and I wish my boss would make me, would not stop making me, that did not work. I wish that my boss would not make me have the uncomfortable financial conversation with the vendor he's supposed to be managing.
Wow, that sucks.
That sucks big time.
Come on, put your heart into it. Let's see if we can disrupt the session next door. All right, Tom, shirt or other?
Other.
Oh, did I just kick something? I think I kicked the power cord here and turned off the TV. That sucks big time. You said other. All right, this is a little hard, so catch.
Nice toss.
Thanks.
Dude.
TV's just turning on. I totally messed something up.
File opener in the shape of a predator.
You really shouldn't put that power source like right at foot level. Okay, who wants to go next?
I go.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Hi, my name is Val, and I wish my boss would stop second-guessing my solutions, which end up being the right one.
Wow, that sucks.
That sucks big time.
All right, shirt or other?
Shirt.
Okay, here it comes. These are all from my personal stash, I remind everyone. Now, I haven't worn these, of course, but I'll remind you what I remind my kids. You get what you get, and you... Thank you. All right, one more. We'll do one more for now. We'll do it again. Over here.
Hi, my name is, Steve. And I wish my boss would stop giving out info piecemeal to different employees.
Wow, that sucks.
That sucks big time.
All right, I think we're almost back. Maybe. Really just, I think I just stepped on it.
Turn it off and back on again?
There we go. All right, we'll do one more while we're waiting. All the way over here.
Team pass.
Oh, overcompensated.
Hi, my name is Sue, and this is going to sound funny, but I really wish my boss would quit cleaning.
Wow, that sucks?
It sucks big time. Trust me, it does.
Okay.
What she gets paid when she cleans.
All right, let's see if this matters. All right, you want to do that? I'm going to say no. Hey, it's the decision chicken. Funny story behind this image. We lost our director of IT who had been there for 25 years, like in 2007, and we went with about a year and a half without having a boss, really. And so we came up with the idea of having a chicken in front of a big board that when you needed decisions made, you'd just put the chicken in front of the board, and whatever it pecked on, that's what you'd go with. So we created this logo for the decision chicken. That's intentional. Hold on. Yeah. There we go. All right, let me get my notes back. See, I even had dreams about this happening, and because of the way Google does their notes, it's a little funky. So apologies for that. And go big or go home. There we go. Okay. If we believe that our relationship with our bosses can be better, where do we start? Managing up requires that you be proactive. You can't just assume that your boss will magically know exactly what you need and give it to you exactly at the moment that you need it. That's that human fallibility thing again. So, where do we start? Well, we can start with figuring out what it is we actually need. So it's time to get to know yourself just a little bit better. Now, this isn't a chance to explore your inner child. Rather, it's an opportunity to better understand your role within your team and your company at large, and where the gaps are that your boss can help fill in. Start by determining your own strengths, weaknesses, and personal style. For a good window into your strengths, I recommend Tom Rath's Strengths Finder book. Has anyone taken this and knows their top strengths? What's your top strength?
I don't remember that.
Oh, took his hand down. Anybody else know their top strength? Hey, me too. Now, unless you're really interested in all the strengths that Tom outlines, you don't really need to read the book. But if you buy it, there's a code for the Strengths Finder assessment tool included in the book. Alternatively, you can follow this link, which will take you to a page where you can just purchase the access code for the standalone test. Now, I'm not a big fan of taking tests that allow people to put me in a box, but I found this to be extremely helpful, especially if your entire team completes the test, as it can give you a common vocabulary for developing your working relationships together. Something that can help you highlight your less desirable qualities is the Johari window model. Now, I talked about this a couple years ago, so I won't go into great detail now. But you can check out my talk from the 2015 MacAdmins conference if you want a better introduction. I will just say that if you're brave enough, this is an extremely useful exercise in revealing how you're perceived by those around you, which can go a long way in uncovering weaknesses that you need to work on. You also need to determine your preferred work style, as this is important to working well with your boss and frankly with the rest of your team for that matter. If you've been working long enough, you may already know what this is, but if not, you need to figure this out before you can begin to work on the relationship with your boss. Are you somebody who deals well with routine and structure, or do you prefer to sort of take the day as it comes? Do you need time to process information before making a decision, or do you prefer to make quick decisions and course correct as necessary? How you answer these and other similar questions can help you begin to determine your preferred work style. If you need a boost on figuring this out, here's a handy assessment tool provided by the Harvard Business Review that can get you started down this path. It'll take you through 25 to 30 quick questions and present you with a potential work style in the end. You can then decide if this sort of jives with your own sense of how you like to work or if you need to explore further. In any case, determining this style is important for you to see how it matches up with your boss's style. Next, know what you're supposed to be successful at and know what that looks like from your boss's perspective. This one thing alone can pay huge dividends down the road. If you know what it looks like to be successful in your boss's eyes, a lot of other problems just fall away. This is especially helpful for aligning your priorities with your boss and with your company as a whole, provided that your boss has done the work to determine what success looks like from his boss's perspective. Also, be sure to recognize any potential conflicts that may exist, personality conflicts rather, that may exist between you and your boss. Let me give you an example. Years ago, we had a network admin on our team who constantly fought with our boss. When this happened, our boss's typical reaction was to dig in his heels and overstate his position. This would only encourage our network admin to take it up a notch, come at our manager with even more intensity, taking special care to point out all the ways that our boss's position made no sense at all, which of course would force our boss to dig in further and hold this position all the more stubbornly. This would typically devolve into an uncomfortable, intense situation, and both of them would walk away frustrated. Eventually, our network admin would just avoid any hint of conflict with our boss for fear that it would spiral out of control. But that didn't stop him from complaining about it to us. However, when we let him know that he always responded this way to challenges on his ideas, and the only difference was he was usually able to overwhelm his peers and get them to give in, he suddenly understood the problem. Since he knew he wasn't likely to change our boss's response to conflict, he chose to work on his own instinctive reaction to being challenged. Now, instead of coming at our boss hard and fast when he saw conflict coming, he would take a beat, suggest that they both take some time to think about it and come back together, and then later they would talk through it after having a little more time to digest it, and more often than not, they'd be able to work through their differences and move forward. Look, you're not going to fundamentally change your own personality, and you're certainly not going to change the personality of your boss, but you can try to be aware of where your two personalities intersect and what might get in the way of working well together. Finally, before you make any attempts to understand your boss better, ask yourself some hard questions about your current relationship with them. The answers to these may also start to define the kind of boss that you have. Is my boss available for me to go to for help? Does my boss trust the work that I do? Do I believe that my boss is capable of doing their job? Is my boss interested in my welfare, or does he see me as a competitor who needs to be eliminated? Can I correctly work out what my boss wants, or am I stuck second guessing from what he's actually saying? And lastly, should the relationship I have with my boss be personal or strictly professional? Now I want to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions up to this point. Excellent. Now it's time to take a hard look at our boss and see if we can figure out what makes them tick. Since we're in question mode, let's try asking some more of those hard questions, but this time about our boss. What are their goals and objectives? What kind of pressures are they under? What are the priorities that they've been given by their boss or the organization as a whole? Who do they trust and listen to, and vice versa, who do they not trust and not listen to? What is their preferred working style? And lastly, what's their preferred communication style? Now, obviously some of this stuff you may be able to determine on your own depending on how long you've been working with your boss, but many of these answers you'll need to get from your boss directly. I can almost guarantee you that if you pose these questions to your boss with a genuine sense of interest, they will likely respond positively. All right, let's talk about our bosses. Should we turn the cameras off for this, or are we going to live dangerously? Okay. First up, do you have a boss that you see occasionally or maybe even never at all? This can be because you or your boss work remotely, or worse, because your boss is an absentee manager. Now, if you or your boss just live in different time zones, there are things you can do to mitigate the obvious disadvantages that exist when you don't work geographically close to someone. Now, we're talking about these in the context of remote managers, but these can easily be applied with any manager. First, think about creating a virtual contract or even an SLA between you and your boss to determine how you should work together. Be proactive about this and don't wait for this to just work itself out. Next, establish rules for communication. And don't just assume that communicating more often will bridge the distance between you, because that can just frequently result in information overload. Instead, rely on an appropriate cadence of communication. Daily check-in email, weekly call, bi-weekly video conference, whatever. Specify a channel, this is very important, for immediate or emergency communication that you will both honor. Slack, text, red Batman phone, whatever. Always be clear about follow-up steps so important issues don't get dropped. This one's tricky, but really important. Get personal. Be more intentional about sharing the personal details of your life. These personal connections help build bonds that might otherwise happen more naturally if you're working in the same location. For example, use the first couple of minutes of your regular check-in meetings to catch up on what's happening personally and professionally in your lives. And be willing to be a little vulnerable. The trust you build with your boss in this process will be invaluable to the success of your work. Lastly, agree to be candid and don't be conflict avoidant. Because you don't have the advantage of building trust through regular face-to-face interactions, you need to rely heavily on transparency and candor to build trust. Always attack conflicts head-on, asking for candid feedback from your boss and giving it in return. Remember, feedback is a gift. We'll talk more about getting candid feedback a little later on. Despite assumptions, what's lacking in remote relationships is not physical closeness, but emotional closeness, clarity, and alignment. Now, what if your boss is geographically close to you, but just not engaged in you or your work? This can be a much bigger problem. If you're in this situation, it may take you a little while to realize it, but you probably have an absentee manager. Now, at first blush, this may seem like a pretty sweet deal. You get to do whatever you want without the unnecessary intrusion of a boss checking in on you. But eventually, you will come to realize that being on your own all the time is pretty limiting. If you don't have the support of your boss, your ability to align your work with the rest of your organization is severely hampered. Also, since your boss is one of your best advocates for helping you grow and advance in your career, if they don't have any idea what you're doing, they can't and probably won't advocate for you. Absentee managers tend to come in two flavors: those that choose to be and those that become so accidentally. So, if you regularly wonder where your boss is, or if they're routinely missing your one-on-one meetings, or they're frequently surprised by what's happening in the team, then they are making a conscious choice to be an absentee manager. And in my estimation, they are failing to do a critical component of their job. On the other hand, if your boss puts a heavy value on autonomy of the team, or has ever said these words out loud: "My job is to hire great people and get out of the way," well, then it's possible they've fallen into being an accidental absentee manager. In either case, it's important to re-engage them in your work, so you're not left flapping in the wind at the worst possible time. So how do you encourage your boss to be more engaged in your work? Well, first of all, you could just straight up ask for it. You could ask for more of their time. Asking your boss for help is not a sign of weakness. And if they've become an absentee manager by accident, they may not even realize it. A lot of well-intentioned managers end up here because they're trying to avoid being a micromanager, but they've just overcompensated. So it may be enough just to make them aware that you would appreciate a little more guidance from them. And one of the best ways to consistently get more of your boss's time is to set one-on-one meetings. I've mentioned these before. These are crucial to having a successful relationship with your boss. They don't need to be long. 30 minutes once or twice a month usually does the trick. But these provide focused time to work through your challenges, ask for help, and keep your boss informed on everything you're doing. In these one-on-ones, you can also ask your boss for what their goals are and how to align their goals with the organization. Remember the questions earlier we talked about. This can help them get more engaged because they recognize the benefit for their own initiatives. Then you can talk to your boss about the goals you have for yourself and have them help you fine-tune those goals for the benefit of the organization. Above all, don't let yourself coast with an absentee manager and assume it's no big deal. Sooner or later, it will have a detrimental impact on your success. So, any questions about remote or absentee managers before we move on? Cool. Now, let's look at the other end of the spectrum, the micromanager. If your boss is constantly telling you what to do or how to do it, or is forever involved in the minutest detail of your day-to-day work, then, my friend, you've got yourself a micromanager. First, remember that micromanaging is not about you. It's really about your boss's need to control all situations because of their own anxiety towards failure. But Maybe your boss feels the need to micromanage you because you're constantly making mistakes. If that's really the case, they shouldn't micromanage you, they should just fire you. But let's assume you're marginally competent at your job, and you're only making the occasional mistake. Now, this is not justification for your boss to micromanage you. Instead, they should be giving you feedback, making clear expectations, and then letting you do your work. Now, if you fail at meeting those expectations, again, they're justified in firing you, but still not micromanaging you. Accept that you're not likely to radically change your boss's behavior, but that doesn't mean you can't change how you respond to it. We'll talk about ways to mitigate the behavior in a minute, but it's important that you don't rail against micromanagement, as this can just sort of lead your boss to feel like you can't be trusted, which will probably just trigger them to get even more involved in your work. Lastly, remember that like absentee managers, micromanagers can come in two flavors. Some like to constantly tell people what to do, while others like to tell people how to do it. If you're lucky enough to have both of these, you might want to pay special attention to these tactics. Micromanagers tend to suffer from the delusion that nothing and no one will ever measure up to their standards. Ironically, this creates enormous amounts of stress for them. So you need to do everything you can to gain their trust by delivering on your work in ways that reduce their overall stress level. If you're unsure how to go about this, you could again try the direct approach and just ask them, hey, what's stressing you out right now? And then align your work to reduce that stress. You'll quickly find that if you're doing great work that directly reduces your boss's stress level, they will come to trust you more and more. Make sure to set specific goals and expectations at the beginning of a project or a period of time. It's important for you to take control of this goal setting. Don't wait for your boss to set them for you. Now be sure that you include them in the process so that they can affirm and agree to those goals, but the ultimate responsibility for your goals lies with you. Talk openly about how you want your boss involved in these goals and where you'll need their help, and then deliver. If you find that over the course of a project or quarter, your boss is getting too mired in the minutia and reverting to telling you what to do or how to do it, you can bring the conversation back to the overarching goals that you both agreed to in the beginning. You can offset some of your boss's tendency to micromanage if you're constantly keeping them in the loop. If they know what you're working on and how you're going about it, they may have less of a compulsion to check in on you. If they feel like they're informed on a project as it progresses, that can reduce their overall anxiety about the success of that project and may get them off your back for a little while. Now, if your boss is constantly giving you new things to do, make sure you ask, for the sake of clarity, okay, if I'm going to start doing this new thing, that means you want me to stop doing this other thing, right? Don't just blindly accept this new thing and then struggle with figuring out how to fit it into your work that you're already doing. Bring your boss into that conversation, as this is a perfect place that they can be very detail-oriented and focused in on. It's part of their job to help you set priorities for your time. If, on the other hand, your boss is constantly telling you how to do your work, you can ask again, for the sake of clarity, what's your rationale for wanting me to do it that way, especially if it's counter to how you might approach the task. It's important that your boss understands that you share their goal for success. The goal's not in question. It's just how you get there that you might differ. So if you've established the necessary trust with your boss, lean into that and see if you can convince them to let you try it your way. However, if autonomy in your work is critical to you, then you are not likely to ever overcome the circumstance of a micromanager. So remember that you have the ultimate control in who manages you, and you can always go find another manager at another job. One more thing. Remember that control does not equal micromanagement. Just because someone is a controlling boss doesn't mean they're a micromanager. If your boss has an extreme attention to detail and tends to exert a certain degree of control without necessarily stifling your creativity, then you may be working for this guy, but you're not working for a micromanager. Too soon? All right, it's time for another round of I Wish My Boss Didn't Suck. Who's up? That was it? Okay, we got one. Who's got the box? Oh, don't throw it. All right, here it comes. Almost nailed it. All right, you know the routine.
Hi. My name's Steve. I wish my boss wouldn't micromanage. I get an email, group email. 3 minutes later, he says, "Did you reply to that yet?"
Wow, that sucks. All right, shirt or other?
Shirt.
Okay, coming at you. I'm not going to make this, though. Close. Okay, anybody else? Back here. Got the box. Gotta go. Ooh, not bad.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and I wish my boss would start standing up for his team when dealing with higher level management.
Wow, that sucks. That sucks big time. Yep. Shirt or other?
Shirt.
Okay, one more. All the way back.
Hi, my name is Rahul,
There you
and I
go.
wish my boss would tell me who my boss is.
Wow, that sucks. That sucks big time. All right, shirt or other?
Shirt.
Oh, man, I'm running out of shirts this time. There you go. Okay. My boss is so stupid. How stupid is he? You know what? Come to think of it, he might not be that stupid. Before you declare your boss an incompetent fool, first take a closer look at yourself. Many of us have blind spots when it comes to our boss. Are you someone who has a natural tendency to resist authority? Or is there some reason you've grown to resent your boss's position, unresolved conflicts, perceived favoritism, etc.? It's possible your assessment of incompetence is strongly tied to those other factors. Also, make sure you have all the facts. Frequently, our bosses are under pressures we never see. If that's the case, then you might want to reassess, because a good boss will protect you from those pressures. So if they are, then they're probably doing a better job than you're giving them credit for. But even if you do decide that you're working with the resident Michael Scott, remember what we said earlier about the fallibility of humans. It does you no good to demonize them. So assuming they are less than capable, what can you do about it? First, get a little help. Find someone who can lend you some perspective. Now, you're not looking for somebody who can just whine and complain to you, because that's a dead-end path that's never going to correct the circumstances that you're in. But if your boss isn't helping you grow or giving you what you need, see if you can find another leader in your organization who can. Next, make it all about you and not your boss. Forget your boss and put all your focus on yourself. Find ways to get what you need from your boss by being as specific as possible. For example, ask, hey, how did I do on that project? Or what would you like me to focus on next, etc. But keep your eye on the big picture. If you're committed to the mission of your organization, double down on that commitment and find ways to achieve success in your work despite your boss's lacking. But try to do it without resenting your boss in the process. Do it because you know it's good for the team and good for the company. However, compensating for your boss's failings does not mean covering them up. If your boss is persistently screwing up, it doesn't serve you or your organization to cover for them. Now, this does not mean that you should rat them out. Avoid the urge to go over your boss's head and complain to their boss. Remember that they still have more power than you in the organization, and trying to take them out will almost never end well for you. Even if you succeed in ousting your boss, more than likely you'll be perceived as a threat to all of their peers. And if you fail, and your boss gets wind that it was you who ratted them out, you have likely damaged that relationship beyond repair. Or worse, you'll end up getting executed while you're fishing with their bodyguard. In the end, you need to take care of yourself. Reporting to an incompetent boss can take a toll both physically and emotionally. Make sure you set boundaries for yourself in this situation that prevent you from becoming a victim of the circumstances. If the main focus of your day is how horrible your boss is, you have abdicated any potential happiness or satisfaction you could derive from your job. You get to choose what to focus on, and you get to choose when it's time to move on. Any questions about incompetent bosses? In the back. We need the box. Oh, wow, good catch.
So it's about the rat.
Okay.
So I have two bosses.
Sorry about that.
And, right. And they're completely different management
that sucks.
styles. And so I'll just say, pertaining to emails, if I send an email to one of them, she'll reply immediately, almost as if I'm typing it. The other one will take a week. But then they'll pit against each other, you know, in replying. They'll pit against each other and they'll come to me. It's like we're like in a three-way married relationship. And I'm already married at home.
You're dealing with divorced parents.
Right. So I don't, it's like, what do I do?
How frequently do the three of you get together and talk?
Fairly often.
Okay. Have you had the open conversation about communication?
Uh,
In terms of setting expectations of, I mean, just to take your example, setting expectations on response to email, to have an agreed upon standard that says, if we send an email to each other, we have an expectation that we'll respond in 48 hours, or what have you.
I think that the boss who doesn't reply is under the assumption that she's too busy, and she assumes that we assume that we accept that. And myself and my boss, who replies very quickly, we talk more together. So I get what you're saying. We should probably, the three of us, sit down.
Again, the best way to clear out assumptions is to have those conversations.
Yeah.
It may be challenging at first, but if you establish those rules for communication that we talked about earlier, that one doesn't feel too hard to overcome if it's just a matter of, now if that has a ripple effect in terms of how they manage in other areas, that's a larger conversation. But
I feel like we need therapy.
yeah, there's a little bit of that. So, other questions? Cool. All right, now let's talk about the insecure boss. Now, the insecure boss is sort of the evil twin of the incompetent boss. This is when you have an incompetent boss who knows that they're incompetent, and so they spend all of their time trying to hide that fact. Sometimes insecure bosses just live in a constant state of fear that they'll be discovered, and so it can be somewhat harmless, but still hugely ineffective. Other times, they will go out of their way to overcompensate for their failings, and when things are going well with the team, they're frequently the ones to claim credit first, and when things go badly, they're usually looking for somebody to throw under the bus. Since the incompetent boss and the insecure boss are closely related, some of the same tactics apply. Again, take in the big picture. If you think your boss is well-meaning but insecure, consider the pressures that they may be under from their bosses. Are they being asked to do a job or contend with challenges that are simply unreasonable? Are they getting little to no support from their boss or their peers? Also, as with the incompetent boss, be honest with yourself about what they are good at and let that balance out the negative perception you have regarding their potentially ego-fueled behavior. Sometimes an insecure boss is that way because they fear the unknown or simply assume the worst when they don't have all the facts. So do your best to be as transparent as possible with them. Avoid any appearance of scheming or planning behind their back, as it will only fuel their insecurities. Learn to frame your suggestions in the right light. Sometimes, due to a lack of confidence in their own ability to do their job, insecure managers will interpret any suggestion for change as an indictment on their work. However, if you're able to frame your suggestion in the context of improving the situation for the entire company, they're less likely to trigger that anxiety. So, also, try to avoid implying that the need for change is your boss's fault. Call out their strengths. If you've taken time to determine what your boss is good at, then play to those strengths. This isn't an exercise in ego stroking. Rather, it should be a genuine attempt to identify your boss's strengths and make it clear to them that you see those strengths. When people feel they're appreciated for what they do well, they will often react more positively when challenged in other areas. Finally, if you do need to challenge them in a way that could provoke anxiety, do it privately instead of in front of the whole team. Not only will you help them save face, but they may also see the challenge as less threatening when it's just the two of you. Now let's talk about the indecisive boss. If the insecure boss is the evil twin of the incompetent boss, this is their kinder, gentler, more frustrating cousin. While this boss may be generally good at many parts of their jobs, they lack the overall confidence to make decisions with authority, or perhaps they're just perfectionists who can't bring themselves to make a decision until they have every scrap of information they can get. These people can be extremely frustrating to work for because you feel like you're never moving forward. Many of us would rather have someone make a bad decision that you can circle back on and correct than make no decision at all. So here's some good methods for helping an indecisive boss overcome their inability to make decisions. Rather than only looking to your boss for the ultimate decision after you've worked through all the details of the problem, bring them into the process much earlier to help you define and work the problem. The process of asking a lot of questions with them and hashing through the details can fill in the information gaps they fear and maybe even make the solution to the problem more obvious and therefore encourage them to make a decision quicker. Break up big decisions into smaller, more bite-sized decisions, and then push your boss to take that first, much smaller step. For example, rather than forcing them to decide on the entire theme for the office Arbor Day celebration, Ask them to decide on the kind of trees they want to plant, and then ask them to decide on the kind of dressing to put on the cucumber sandwiches. After a while, with enough of these smaller successes under their belt, they will gradually improve their decision-making skills to the point that this process may become unnecessary. This is another time when you want to build trust with your boss. Indecisive people look to others they trust that they can talk to before making a decision. Be one of those people. Build a level of trust with your boss that encourages them to talk through tough decisions with you. Sometimes, if their trust in you is strong enough, they may actually delegate some of that decision-making authority to you. When everything's said and done, if your manager's inability to make decisions is truly holding back or even hurting the team, it's time to sit down as a group and have an open and honest conversation about it. If you're respectful and sincere, odds are good that your manager will respond with some quality decision-making. Okay, any questions on the insecure or the indecisive boss before we move on to our last one? Okay. Are you and your boss besties? At first glance, being friends with your boss can seem like a great idea, right? They're more sympathetic to your faults and failings, they inherently trust you more, they're more likely to throw you the choice projects from time to time. They just know you better and can therefore advocate for you better. It's possible this kind of relationship can even make the process of managing up a little easier. But there are some serious pitfalls to befriending your boss. It's important to remember that this person still has the power to fire you, deny your promotion, and generally screw up your life if the friendship turns sour. So, how do you know if it's all right to take your relationship with your boss to the next level? Ask yourself these questions. Were you friends before they became your boss? It's easier for your boss to become your friend than your friend to become your boss. Because you've established a certain kind of rapport with your friend before they became your boss, it can be hard to make the shift to the new reality. If you have a shared history together before becoming boss and employee, then the lines can be very blurry as to where one relationship ends and the next one begins. If you both can't be intentional about maintaining the necessary boundaries of the relationship, you may be setting yourselves up for further complications. For example, you might confide in your friend how you have had it with Bob from tech support, who is constantly stealing your kombucha from the fridge. So you laced it with laxatives and then just reveled in watching him go to the bathroom like a dozen times one morning. Would you tell that same story to your boss? Now, are you considering a friendship because you actually like your boss and have shared interests, or are you just hoping it'll serve your career goals? Don't be that guy. Any relationship based on false pretenses will not be a strong one. But especially in the workplace, one-sided friendships you make to serve your larger Machiavellian goals will likely end in disaster. By all means, if you really like your boss and want to nurture a friendship with them, it's probably worth considering, but don't do it just to get ahead. Be aware of the potential resentment your coworkers might feel towards you for having a more personal relationship with your boss. Keep an eye out for decisions your boss might make that could hint at any sort of favoritism towards you. Be open to feedback from your teammates that could demonstrate they're less than happy with the arrangement. If you notice anything, have the conversation with your boss about keeping things above board and fair. Also be on the lookout for your boss to go to the other end of the extreme. In the interest of avoiding the appearance of favoritism, they may be harder on you than they are on the rest of the team. If that comes up, again, have the conversation with your boss. Acknowledge the need to avoid favoritism, but make sure you're still getting a fair shake. Lastly, is friending your boss on Facebook the same thing as becoming friends? Yes? No? Maybe? I don't know. Who here is friends with their boss on Facebook? Okay. Of the bosses in the room, who here is friends with their direct reports? Whoa. This really comes down to a personal preference and how you personally use social media. If you're more focused on social media for professional gain, then by all means, friend away. In fact, you should be friending as many people as you can from your company, from the janitor all the way to the president. But if, on the other hand, you use social media like some people use social media, then friending your boss on Facebook could be the beginning of your termination proceedings. Accepting your boss's friend request could introduce the need for a whole new level of censorship in what you put on Facebook. If that radically alters how you use social media in a negative way, then keep that boundary intact and avoid crossing the friendship line. At the end of the day, A stronger relationship with your boss really is a good thing, but whether or not that should stray into genuine friendship is something you should approach with caution. All right, time for our last round of I Wish My Boss Didn't Suck. Got one right up in the front. Where's the box? All the way in the back. All right, he's going to bowl it. I can see it.
My name is Batman.
There you go.
And I wish my boss would not skip our annual reviews.
Ooh, wow, that sucks. That sucks big time. Shirt or other? I have one shirt left, but it's pretty awesome.
Doodad.
Did you say doodad? All right. I don't have doodads, man. Okay. Anybody else? We got two here. We'll go all the way to Adam, and then we'll go back here. Man, you guys have no confidence in throwing this thing.
My name is Jorge.
There it is. Oh, I didn't see anything.
And I wish my boss didn't try and have his fingers in every single pie in our area to
Wow.
the detriment of all those pies.
That sucks.
That sucks big time.
Shirt or other?
Other.
Other, okay. You get the Moleskine Day.
I'll walk out.
That's a good call. That's a
Who's
good call.
next?
Come get it later. That's Jorge's.
My name's Danny, and I wish my boss would stop brushing his teeth at my desk.
Oh, wow, that sucks.
That sucks big time.
Man. Shirt or other?
I'll do shirt.
Okay. Now I got to show this because this is pretty awesome. You get this.
Nice.
Yeah, you know, see, all of you guys are wishing now. You want to give backstory on the teeth brushing at your desk thing?
He just kind of walks into the office and starts brushing his teeth.
It's just horrible, man. Oh, jeez. Here, you know what? You get an extra thing for that. That's bad. Wow. All right, I have 4 more prizes, so we'll figure out how to give them away. All right. What if your boss doesn't fit any of the molds we've already talked about? Or maybe they fit more than one? Regardless, there are some universal tactics that you can use to help improve your relationship with any boss. Now, we've already talked about taking time to get to know your boss and how that can pay huge dividends. What are their goals and objectives? What pressures are they typically under from their boss or the organization? What are their particular strengths, weaknesses, and what are their blind spots? Last and most important, what is their preferred work style and communication style? Now, it's time for a little DTR. You need to define the relationship with your boss. This happens in 3 crucial ways. First is owning your one-on-one meetings. Second is you need to ask for and be receptive to feedback. Third is you need to be in constant pursuit of greater clarity. Now, I've talked about one-on-one meetings a few times already, and again, these are crucial to your success in managing up. So if you don't have them, get them. If you have them, own them. This is your meeting, so own the agenda. Things you can include in this agenda are: what's been the focus of your time since your last one-on-one? What were your successes? What were your challenges? How can your boss help you succeed in the coming weeks? And lastly, what feedback do you have for your boss? And speaking of feedback, it's not just for Nickelback concerts. A show of hands for everyone interested in actually getting better at their job. Wow, that's it? You lazy mother... No. Okay. Assuming the rest of you are just too tired to raise your hands and you really do want to get better at what you do, what's one of the best tools at getting better at something? Feedback. Again, by show of hands, how many of you receive regular feedback from your boss? Talking about all kinds of feedback: praise, criticism, actionable feedback. That is really pathetic. All right, how many of the rest of you would welcome more and better feedback from your boss? Man, some of you guys are scared. All right, so how do you get it? How do you receive it? How do you act on it? And how do you keep it coming? Look, almost nobody likes to give feedback. Doesn't matter who you're giving it to: your wife, your coworker, your boss, your kids, that guy who just cut you off in traffic. Except for maybe the last one, and possibly your kids, nobody really likes giving feedback. Well, why not? Well, because when you praise someone with positive feedback, it can feel patronizing. But when you give someone critical feedback, it can feel mean. And almost nobody likes to feel patronizing and mean, which is why almost nobody gives feedback. even when it's part of their job, vis-a-vis your boss. But all of us desperately need feedback to get better at our work. The ultimate goal in developing a feedback loop with your boss is to achieve radical candor. Now, to help put this in context, consider this chart from the folks over at Candor, Inc. First, make note of the two axes, caring personally and challenging directly. These represent two fundamental states of management. Your boss either gives a damn about you or they don't. And they'll either risk pissing you off in order to help you grow, or they won't. All of our bosses fall naturally into one of these four quadrants. They may visit some of the other quadrants from time to time, usually by accident, but in the absence of real self-awareness and based on personality and style, you'll find them hunkered down in just one, and it's almost never the top right one. So, what do each of these represent? Going counterclockwise from the top left, you have ruinous empathy. Now, this is that boss who really cares about you but just can't bring themselves to give you critical feedback for fear that they'll hurt your feelings. Or their praise is so non-specific that you really have no idea what you did well. This is where most of our managers live. Next down in the bottom left corner is manipulative insincerity. This is, thankfully, that rare boss that neither gives a damn about you nor helps you grow as a professional. If they do give you feedback, it's usually unclear, non-specific, and mean. Bottom right is obnoxious aggression. This one is the boss who really sucks about caring for people, but they are laser focused on telling you what they think about your job performance and how you can get better. In the absence of radical candor, this is the next best thing. Obviously, the sweet spot we want to land on is radical candor. This is that intersection between caring personally and challenging directly. This is a place where the praise you get from your boss is specific and the criticism is delivered with kindness. So, sorry, how can we help? Sorry. Any Catholics? Any Catholics in the room? Sorry. It's true, I'm not kidding. So, how can you help your boss overcome their natural tendency to avoid giving quality feedback or any feedback at all? Well, Gladys, you're going to need to step outside of your comfort zone and ask for it. Soliciting feedback doesn't have to be painful and awkward. Well, it might be a little awkward, but just like middle school makeout sessions, it's only awkward at first. First, let's focus on the asking. There are ways you can make it easier for your boss to give you feedback. Start by having a go-to question that you can easily pull out at the right moment. My favorite one that I use in all my one-on-ones when I finish it up is say, what do you need from me that I'm not giving you? You could also ask, how can I make your job easier? Or is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? If none of these feel comfortable, come up with your own, but have it ready when the opportunity presents itself. Which brings us to the next tip. Choose your time wisely. The best time to ask for feedback is not when your boss is headed out the door for his 5-week vacation in the Poconos, or in the middle of a weekly staff meeting surrounded by the rest of your team. You want to do this privately at a time when your boss actually has time to respond. Try to tie your request to a specific project that you worked on recently. If the work is fresh in your boss's mind, you're much more likely to get quality feedback than if you just ask more broadly about how you're doing. This is another opportunity to leverage your one-on-one meetings. You can put a specific item in your agenda to ask for feedback, which can get the two of you in the habit of exchanging feedback with each other. Try seeding the ground with some of your own feedback on yourself. Suggest some areas that you think you need improvement on and ask your boss if they agree with you. If you give them time to elaborate, they will likely come up with additional areas that might be helpful. Keep score. Keep tabs on how many times a week your boss praises or criticizes you. If it's more praise than criticism, encourage your boss more towards radical candor and candid feedback. Finally, look outside the relationship. If your boss just isn't giving you the kind of feedback you think you need, it's time to look elsewhere in your organization. Remember that you work with a lot of people who see the work you do every day and probably have an opinion about it. So take your go-to question to one of them and see if you get better results. Okay, so you've successfully overcome the hurdle of getting your boss to sit down and give you feedback. In fact, you're actually sitting across from them right now and you've just asked them your go-to question. Now what? Well, here's where that awkwardness comes in we talked about earlier. With luck, this is the worst it will get. After asking that question to your boss, stop talking and wait. Embrace the awkwardness. As the silence stretches on, you'll be tempted to fill it to ease their discomfort. Resist that urge. When it's clear to them that you're not going to break the silence, they will opt to say something rather than continue in the uncomfortable silence. And just like that, you've taken the first steps towards improving your relationship with your boss. But that doesn't mean it's smooth sailing on the sea of awesome feedback. Now it's time for you to shut up and listen. But listen with a desire to understand, not to respond. Don't interrupt them or argue with what they're saying. Just listen and try to learn. When they're done, check to make sure you understand. Ask clarifying questions. Repeat back the issues they've raised as you understand them. Be sure that you fully understand their perspective. Try to avoid asking for examples. While it's usually helpful to provide examples when you're giving feedback, if you ask for them when receiving it, it can feel like they need to defend their feedback, which can warn them off of giving you feedback in the future. Above all, make sure you don't fall into a defensive posture. Keep your focus on understanding your boss's perspective and not responding with your own point of view. Now's a good time to talk about the rightness and wrongness of feedback. Keep in mind that feedback doesn't need to be right to be helpful. How many times have you received feedback from someone that you thought was completely off base? Should be almost everybody in the room. What's your first instinct in that moment? To defend yourself and explain how you think their opinion is whacked, right? Well, what if instead of following that first instinct, you just received the feedback and said, hey, thanks for your perspective. If you remove the rightness criteria from feedback, it allows you to be open to all sorts of feedback without needing to accept that everything you hear is the gospel truth. Speaking as a manager, it also frees me from the burden of feeling like I need to back up every bit of criticism with empirical proof. If you and your boss can both go into a feedback conversation without the burden of rightness, it will make the entire process easier and more fruitful for both of you. Okay, so you've asked for feedback, your boss has given you their perspective, and you have listened with a desire to understand that perspective. We're all done, right? Mission accomplished. Well, not if you want more feedback in the future. Now is the time to treat their feedback as the exceptional gift that it is. Prove to them that you've heard their feedback and you truly appreciate their efforts. If you agree with the feedback, make visible changes based on what they offered. If you disagree with the feedback, first see the previous slide about feedback needing to be right. Next, see if there's something about the feedback that you actually do agree with and highlight that. Then, if you can provide a respectful response in the moment as to why you disagree with the rest of their perspective, offer that. However, if you're pissed off or irritated by their feedback, now is not the time to air that grievance. Instead, let them know that you'll consider what they've offered and get back to them later. And then actually get back to them later. Your respectful response will give them an opportunity to either see things from your perspective or provide them a chance to further explain theirs. The final tactic that you need to apply on a regular basis, one more thing. There we go. Above all else, remember that if your boss feels punished for offering feedback or that the feedback is simply ignored, they will stop giving it. But if you reward their feedback with action, either in the shape of genuine change or deeper discussion, they will take the risk to offer more feedback in the future. By the way, feedback is a two-way street. More than likely, your boss would welcome respectful feedback on how they can do their job better for you. So take advantage of that opportunity if it presents itself. Final tactic you need to apply on a regular basis is to be in constant pursuit of greater clarity. Who's experienced this situation? Your boss walks into your office and says, hey, can you take care of this for me? Taken at face value, that's a 9-word recipe for failure. So, rather than take that at face value, follow up with some simple questions. First, ask, how would you like me to accomplish this? Sometimes the response could be, I don't know, which should lead to further discussion. But if there's a specific way your boss wants this done, now is the time to ask. Also ask, when would you like this done? This is critical to understanding the urgency of the request. Can it wait until the end of the week, the end of the month, or does it need to happen by the end of the day? Lastly, ask, do you want me to stop doing that other thing so that I could do this thing? This speaks to the overall priority of the task compared to the other work that you're already doing. In general, however you want, as soon as possible, and are not good answers to these questions. All right, let's close this out with a basic checklist for managing up. 1, assess yourself and your needs. Determine your own strengths and weaknesses. Identify your preferred work style. 2, make sure you understand your boss and their context, including their goals and objectives, their pressures, their strengths and weaknesses and blind spots, and their preferred work and communication style. And 3, remember that a successful relationship with your boss fits both your styles and meets both your needs, clearly identifies mutual expectations, keeps both you and your boss informed, and is grounded in mutual dependence, honesty, and respect. And that's it. We got 15 minutes if anybody has any questions or more expressions of suckage of their boss. I got a few more prizes. Questions? We need the box. Oh, I got the box. Coming at you.
Hi, I work on our company's tech team, and we're split into 2 parts. One, the engineers who support our client-facing application, and me, who's more on the backside infrastructure of supporting our employees. My boss is more passionate about the other side, so how do I get him to start respecting sort of the back-end infrastructure side, if that's not where his passion is?
Well, that's tricky. I mean, you kind of have to identify, passion is one thing, but it goes back to that engaging your boss in your work. If you can find a way to align the work that you're doing with the larger goals of if you know the larger goals of the organization from your boss's perspective, and can identify the connection between your work and those goals, you can inherently sort of bring your boss more into a level of engagement with the work that you're doing. Again, part of it sort of goes back to clearly identifying what the goals are. Maybe even having that conversation with your boss to say, hey, what are your goals for my team? What do you want us to accomplish in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? And then hash those out a little bit. Other questions? Tom? Box.
Thanks for this. Once upon a time, at a job a long time ago, the IT department fell in an odd place in the management structure, and it led to a lot of unintended consequences on the part of management, I think is a good way of putting it. That's the most charitable reading of the situation. We ended up under HR, which makes like no sense at all. And it led to essentially the attrition of the entire IT department in the space of a year. I'm leery of that kind of behavior being repeated by other businesses, so when we encounter internal IT that's maybe not where they're supposed to be, what kind of things can you use to talk with management about where IT fits in an infrastructure?
Wow.
Because I feel like that's addressing a bad boss issue, but kind of coming at it sideways.
That's addressing strategic issues with the organization as a whole. You need to have that conversation with the larger leadership to identify what are the strategies and goals that the leadership has identified, the direction your company wants to go, and then how do you come in and meet those expectations with the operations level of the organization. So that, unfortunately, that conversation has to happen at a much higher level than it can have at sort of a manager, employee kind of level. Because once you're down at this sort of manager operations level, you're just sort of responding to the initiatives and strategy that you've been given. You have to align yourself to the strategy of the organization. If those haven't been identified in a way that's clear, though it could be enough just to voice the fact that, okay, we're not clear on what it is we're supposed to be doing, or how we're supposed to succeed, or even what success looks like in the eyes of the organization. So, other questions? All over here. Come on, Tom. Give me your prize back. You lost that. No, I'm kidding.
What is the best way to deal with a boss who doesn't follow up with things on their end from a meeting you have with them? Like, for instance, like we had our annual review about 2 months ago.
Right.
I left taking their notes away. I gave them feedback and things that I'm looking for, like growth and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't follow up with that. What's the best way to
The
deal
best
with
way
that?
to do that is within the context of your performance evaluation, identify times that you're gonna revisit these goals through the year. I do it with my team every 3 months. So we do, you know, employee evaluations tend to fall kind of over the place, but we just did ours in January. And in March, we did it at the beginning of January, so the beginning of January, March, yeah. Beginning of April, whatever 3 months is. Don't make me do math. We visit those, and so you identify that within the context of the performance evaluation to say, we're gonna come back at this time and revisit the goals. So you've set that clear expectation for the both of you. So you know that you have a certain amount of time to work on these goals, and if you're falling off the rails or just knocking it out of the park, you can identify that at the check-in time. Again, that's where you're having those one-on-one meetings. You just dedicate to say, okay, our one-on-one meeting in March will be when we'll check back on these, right? And they know they've got work to do as well. So by all means, don't wait the entire year before you revisit those goals at the next performance evaluation, because that's just, because if you've like screwed up on those and they haven't told you for the entire year, again, that's their failing, not entirely yours too. So good one here.
Do you have any tips for managing up with a boss that is willfully ignorant?
Willfully ignorant. That's, I think that's the, wow. Like they just have no interest in.
Yeah, pretty much.
Again, that's a scenario where I would look outside your relationship with your boss and find other leaders in your institution that you can rely on for either guidance in, you know, how you should align with the strategies of your whole organization, or even just mentoring help on, you know, growing in your career path. If your boss isn't doing it for you, find somebody who will, or find another job. Back behind you.
What about when the biggest problem is your boss's relationship with his boss? So for example, he has a very micromanaging boss and doesn't necessarily always manage that relationship in the best way.
That's trickier. Show him this presentation.
We'll just edit that out now.
Yeah, that's tricky because you can't tell your boss how to manage up. I mean, you know what might be helpful is if you demonstrate to your boss what managing up looks like between the two of you, they may sort of take some of that as an indication of how they might do it for their own boss. Yeah, there's not a silver bullet on that one because that's, yeah, you're dealing with relationships completely outside of your control. You have no input into that at all. So, yeah. Sorry. Wow, that sucks. All over here. Oh, that was close.
My first question, would it be okay to show this slide deck as a professional development for coworkers at our respective places of employment?
Once it hits YouTube, I have no control over it.
Excellent. Because I could see this being really helpful. My boss was really good friends with the IT director at his former job. And unfortunately, I think that's led to a situation where he believes he understands what I do on a regular basis because they were good friends. But the role I have is a little bit different than a 5-person organization versus a 1-person organization.
Right.
And I think, would you recommend going through this presentation with him as a way of?
You might not want to be that overt about it. Hey, guess what? For our one-on-one, we're going to watch this. No, but it actually, I think there is an opportunity for you if you're doing one-on-one meetings with him regularly to put a little more emphasis on your challenges and kind of elucidate those a little bit more. And it may sort of get them clued into the fact that they don't really understand what you do and the challenges that you face. So if you can sort of put more emphasis on the challenges that you have in your job, that might give them a little bit of a window into the fact that they need to learn a little more.
Cool, thank you.
Other questions?
Who's next?
Okay, going once. Twice sold. Oh, we got one. Oh, come on, man.
I'm gonna go to the end. I'm gonna go to the end of this aisle here.
We almost got out of here 6 minutes early.
All right.
Hit the cutoff, man. Hit the cutoff, man.
2 for 2.
I really want a blooper reel at the end of PSU of everybody trying to catch this box. That's what I
All
would
right,
say.
so we know what we hate about our bosses. What are the pet peeves that you have of employees, just personally speaking?
Lack of managing up.
All right.
No.
What's another one?
Yeah, no, I mean, in all seriousness, there are ways in which I would love to get more feedback from my team on what I'm not doing well. It's sort of, even when I profess this in my own team, and we've been working on this for a while, it's still sort of an awkward place to get into to criticize your boss. I would love more critical feedback from my team on because I want to get better. The only way I get better is by hearing feedback from the people I work most with, which is my team. My own boss almost never sees me because he's a CTO and he's got a million different things that are pulling him into different directions. So he doesn't see my day-to-day. Actually, part of one of the things that we do in our performance evaluations is when I do my performance evaluation with my boss, or rather, sorry, let me flip that around. When I send out performance evaluations for my team, one of the things they do is fill out a feedback form on my work. Now, it's anonymous, so I try to make it the bar as low as possible in terms of getting them to really follow through on it. And then my boss gets that feedback. I never see it. And then they sort of aggregate it, and then they include that in their performance evaluation with me. So yeah, that's, I think, probably one of my biggest things, because I can't get any better if I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And so as far as employees, helping their managers, that's a key way. And if your manager really is interested in getting better, they will welcome feedback. I almost guarantee it. If you got a crappy manager who just wants to coast, maybe not so much. But if you have a manager who genuinely wants to get better, they will welcome feedback. We had James.
So I've been to a few of your talks, and I'm always impressed by how they're put together. So do you?
Wait, you get a prize for that. Come here.
So do you give these talks often? I
actually don't.
Is this the only place you do them?
This is pretty much the only place that I present.
That's even more impressive, I have to say. I enjoy it.
Yeah, Justin. Yeah, I would, but it's tricky. Well, in one respect, it's hard to kind of plug yourself into that speaking circuit when you've got so many other things to do, and it's just not something that I've put a lot of energy into. But I appreciate it. So, all the way up front. See, you guys thought we were going to have it early.
Thanks. So, as a supervisor, do you have any, if you're lacking that feedback from your employees, do you have any sort of self-diagnostics that you do to kind of make sure that you're not falling into any of these traps?
There's some really cool tools that I'm looking to take advantage of. There's, I talked about the Radical Candor group. They actually have an app that sort of allows your employees to sort of give you that kind of immediate feedback. So I'm trying to plug into different ways that I can sort of coax them into giving me more feedback. This is one I think I'm going to explore in the summer. Sorry, in summer, by the fall, where they just sort of, it sort of reminds them weekly, what kind of feedback have you gotten? And it actually puts them, they frame it within the context of those 4 quadrants. Was the feedback you got radically candid? Was it obnoxiously aggressive? So all those things. And so, yeah, like I say, for me, that's my best source of improving the work that I do. And so, other than that, it's just sort of being open to conversations, being open to conflict. I tend to be unique in the sense that I fly into conflict with abandon, and I don't get defensive. So it's great for me to just go into something with somebody who is really pissed off at me and just learn from that. I tend not to kind of feel the need to defend myself in that. So I'm lucky in that regard, but that's just one of my tactics. So, any other questions?
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thanks.
Safe to assume, well, let me back up. I'm my own boss. I ask for my job every year from any number of clients.
Mm-hmm.
Is it safe to assume these practices apply?
They do, because you have a bunch of bosses. You got a ton of TPS reports to fill out. Yeah, I mean, from the consulting standpoint, I was talking about this with Tom earlier, from a consulting standpoint, and actually with Chris too, you guys have a wealth of opportunity to get feedback from your clients as they're your bosses, basically. So there's, and that's almost an easier feedback loop to create, I think, because there's less of sort of the emotional weightiness to that relationship. Somebody you work with every day who's part of your team, if they give you feedback that you don't respond well to, they have to come back in the next day and work with you. your client may not see you for a month, and so they may feel a lot more willing to give you feedback that might be they might risk it in the case that it's received poorly. So yeah, I'd take full advantage of that. I mean, if you don't have a feedback form for your clients, even on a per job basis of, hey, this is what we completed, you go through what you did, how do you feel like we did we meet your expectations, did we exceed, that kind of thing. So I would create that structure. I think it's a great opportunity. Other questions? All right, oh, yep, no more questions, time's up. Thank you all, appreciate it.